The sun hung low over the barren plains of New Mexico territory, casting long shadows across the cracked earth like skeletal fingers reaching toward tomorrow. Thomas McCarty knelt beside his dying campfire, the last orange embers barely warming his calloused hands. His stomach gnawed at itself with the familiar ache of 3 days without a proper meal, and his water barrel held nothing but dust and the memory of better times. The drought had claimed everything: his cattle, his dreams, his future. Now only his faithful horse, Dusty, remained tethered to a withered mesquite tree, her ribs showing beneath a coat that had once gleamed like burnished copper. Thomas reached into his worn saddlebag and pulled out his last possession of value: a small loaf of hardtack bread, no bigger than his fist. It was meant to last him until he reached Santa Fe, still 2 days' ride through this god-forsaken wasteland. The wind carried sounds across the desert, not the usual whisper of sand against stone, but something else. Footsteps, light, careful, moving with the practiced silence of someone who had learned that noise meant danger. Thomas's hand instinctively moved to his Colt .45, then froze as a small figure emerged from behind a cluster of prickly pear cacti. It was a boy, no more than 8 or 9 years old, with the distinctive features of the Apache people. His dark hair hung in matted strands around a face etched with exhaustion and fear. His clothes, traditional buckskin leggings and a torn shirt, hung loose on his small frame, telling the story of many hungry days. Most striking were his eyes, large and dark, holding depths of sorrow that no child should carry. The boy stopped 20 feet away, his gaze fixed on Thomas with the wariness of a wild animal. Neither moved for a long moment, the tension stretching between them like a taut wire ready to snap. Thomas had heard the stories, knew the hatred that burned between his people and the Apache. But looking at this child, he saw only hunger and desperation mirroring his own. "You're a long way from anywhere, little one," Thomas said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The boy's head tilted slightly, understanding the tone if not the words. Thomas slowly moved his hand away from his weapon and held up the piece of bread. The child's eyes followed the movement with the intensity of a hawk watching prey. The boy's name was Nalnish, though Thomas would not learn this until much later. For now, they communicated in the universal language of need and compassion. The child took a hesitant step forward, then another, his bare feet making no sound on the hard-packed earth. Thomas broke the bread in half, the action causing his own stomach to clench in protest, and extended one piece toward the boy. "Go on," Thomas murmured, gesturing with his chin. "You need it more than I do." Nalnish's eyes darted between Thomas's face and the offered food, searching for signs of deception or trap. Years of conflict had taught his people to trust no white man, yet hunger is a more immediate master than caution. The boy crept forward, snatched the bread with quick fingers, and immediately retreated to what he judged a safe distance. Thomas watched as the child devoured the bread with desperate efficiency, trying not to think about his own gnawing hunger. Instead, he poured some of his precious remaining water into his metal cup and set it on the ground between them. The boy looked at it longingly, but made no move to approach. "It's all right," Thomas said, pushing the cup closer with his boot. "Go ahead." Trust came slowly, built sip by careful sip. As the boy drank, Thomas studied his face, noting the signs of recent tears tracked through the dust on his cheeks. This child had lost something precious: family, most likely. In this harsh land, Apache children didn't wander alone unless tragedy had torn their world apart. The wind picked up, bringing with it the scent of distant rain that might never come. Thomas shared more of his water, then gave the boy the remaining half of his bread, ignoring his own body's protests. As darkness fell across the desert, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, an understanding passed between man and child that transcended language and racial divide. Nalnish curled up near the dying fire, his small body trembling not just from cold but from exhaustion and grief. Thomas removed his jacket, his only protection against the desert night, and carefully draped it over the sleeping boy. The child's breathing gradually steadied, finding peace for the first time in days. Thomas sat back against his saddle, staring up at stars that seemed close enough to touch in the clear desert air. He had given away his last food and most of his water to a child whose people were at war with his own. By morning, he would be weaker, more vulnerable, with even less chance of surviving the journey to Santa Fe. Yet as he watched the boy's peaceful face in the firelight, Thomas felt no regret. Some acts transcended survival, they defined what it meant to be human. Dawn broke with the subtle grace of a watercolor painting, washing the desert in soft pastels that would soon surrender to the harsh glare of full Sunday. Thomas woke to find the boy still sleeping beneath his jacket, curled like a small animal seeking warmth and safety. The cowboy's body ached with cold and hunger. His lips cracked from thirst, but he moved quietly to avoid disturbing the child's rest. As he rekindled the fire with dry grass and his last few matches, Thomas heard a sound that made his blood run cold. Hoofbeats, many of them, approaching from the north in a rhythm that spoke of purpose and determination. His hand moved instinctively to his weapon as he squinted into the morning haze, trying to count the riders approaching across the plain. The dust cloud grew larger, resolving into individual shapes that made Thomas's breath catch in his throat. Apache warriors, at least 50 of them, riding hard toward his small camp. Their war paint caught the early light, and the morning air carried the soft jingle of their ornaments and weapons. At their head rode a man whose bearing spoke of leadership and authority, his face marked with the stern lines of someone who had seen too much war and loss. Thomas gently shook the boy awake. Nalnish's eyes opened immediately, the survival instincts of his people allowing no gradual awakening. When he saw the approaching riders, the child's face transformed with a mixture of joy and relief so profound it brought tears to Thomas's eyes. The boy leaped to his feet, calling out in his native tongue, his young voice carrying across the desert like a song of homecoming. The lead warrior, clearly the chief, raised his hand, and the war party slowed to a walk, then stopped in a semicircle around Thomas's camp. The chief dismounted with fluid grace, his eyes moving from the boy to Thomas, taking in every detail of the scene. His weathered face showed no emotion, but Thomas could sense the keen intelligence behind those dark eyes, weighing and measuring. Nalnish ran to the chief, his words tumbling out in rapid Apache. Thomas caught the cadence of explanation, of gratitude, of a child telling his grandfather about kindness received from an unexpected source. The chief listened intently, his gaze never leaving Thomas's face, as if reading the cowboy's soul through his eyes. When the boy finished speaking, a profound silence fell over the desert. Thomas stood slowly, keeping his hands visible and away from his weapons. Knowing that his life balanced on a knife's edge, the chief studied him for a long moment, then spoke a single word in Apache. Several warriors dismounted, and Thomas prepared himself for whatever fate awaited. Chief Naye, for that was his name, though Thomas would learn it later, approached with the measured step of a man accustomed to making decisions that affected the lives of many. His weathered hands, marked with the scars of countless battles, moved with surprising gentleness as he examined his grandson, checking for injuries and signs of mistreatment. Naalnish chattered excitedly, pointing to the empty cup, the remains of the fire, and Thomas's jacket that still lay where the boy had slept. The chief's eyes moved to Thomas's horse, noting Dusty's poor condition, then to the cowboy's gaunt face and worn clothing. Without speaking, he walked to Thomas's small pile of belongings, observing the empty saddlebags, the depleted water barrel, the absence of food. His experienced eye took in the story written in these simple details, a man reduced to nothing, yet who had shared what little he possessed. Thomas stood motionless, his heart hammering against his ribs as he watched the chief piece together the previous night's events. The other warriors remained mounted but alert, their hands resting casually on their weapons. The morning sun climbed higher, painting everything in stark relief. The moment felt suspended between past and future, between conflict and possibility. Chief Naye returned to his horse and retrieved a leather pouch. He opened it, revealing dried meat and flat bread provisions that Thomas recognized as far superior to his own meager rations. The chief broke off a generous portion and offered it to Thomas, speaking in Apache with a tone that sounded almost formal, almost ceremonial. Nalnish translated in broken English, his young voice proud and clear. Grandfather says you have great heart. You give food when you have none. You give water when you thirst. You give warmth when you cold. This is the way of honor. Thomas accepted the food with trembling hands, not from fear but from overwhelming emotion. Tell your grandfather I only did what anyone should do for a child in need, he said quietly. The boy translated, and Chief Naye's stern expression softened almost imperceptibly. He placed his hand on Thomas's shoulder, a gesture that caused several warriors to shift uneasily in their saddles, and spoke again. He says the Apache remember kindness, Nalnish translated. He says you are friend to his people now. brother of the desert. The chief moved to his horse and pulled out a beautiful water skin, decorated with beadwork and painted symbols. He offered it to Thomas, full of cool, clean water. Then came more food, enough to last several days, and a thick blanket woven in traditional patterns. But the greatest gift was yet to come. Chief Naye spoke to his warriors in their native tongue, his voice carrying the authority of absolute leadership. Thomas watched as several braves dismounted and began examining Dusty with the practiced eye of men who understood horses. They spoke quietly among themselves, nodding toward Thomas with what seemed like approval. One warrior, younger than the others but clearly respected, approached, leading a magnificent paint horse, black and white patches flowing across her coat, like spilled paint on canvas. The animal was clearly well-fed, well cared for, with intelligent eyes and the proud bearing of superior breeding. The warrior offered the lead rope to Thomas, speaking in Apache. "My grandfather says your horse is tired and needs rest," Nalnish translated, his young voice struggling with the complex concepts. "He says you take Thunder Moon. She will carry you swift and safe to where you go." Thomas stared at the magnificent animal, unable to believe what was happening. "I can't accept such a gift," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "This horse is worth more than everything I own." Chief Naye seemed to understand the sentiment, if not the exact words. He spoke again, and this time his tone was firmer, brooking no argument. "Grandfather says a gift refused is an insult to the giver," the boy explained. "He says Thunder Moon chooses her rider, and she has chosen you. Look." Indeed, the paint horse had moved closer to Thomas, nuzzling his shoulder with soft lips, her breath warm against his neck. The connection was immediate and undeniable. This animal and this man were meant to be partners. As Thomas accepted the lead rope with reverent hands, more gifts appeared. A new saddle, crafted in the Apache style but modified for a white man's needs. Saddlebags, filled with provisions. A water barrel that would never leave him thirsty again. But perhaps most precious of all, a small leather pouch containing silver coins enough to buy supplies and secure passage to a new life wherever he chose to go. Chief Naye gestured toward the south, speaking rapidly to his grandson, who listened intently before turning back to Thomas. "Grandfather says there is a place, 3 days' ride toward the big mountains, white man's settlement, but good people. They need someone who knows horses, knows the land. He says you go there, tell them Chief Naye sends you, and they will welcome you." The old chief reached into his shirt and pulled out a small amulet, a piece of turquoise carved in the shape of a horse, strung on a leather cord. He placed it around Thomas's neck with ceremony, speaking words that sounded like a blessing or perhaps a prayer. "This is sacred stone," Nalnish translated solemnly. "It means you are under protection of the Apache. No warrior of our people will raise hand against you. You are brother now, forever." The transformation was so complete, so overwhelming, that Thomas felt as though he had awakened in a different world. Where yesterday he had been a desperate man with nothing but failure behind him and death ahead, he now stood surrounded by wealth beyond his dreams and the protection of one of the most feared tribes in the Southwest. Chief Naye gathered his warriors for final words, and Thomas listened to the musical flow of Apache speech, understanding nothing of the language but everything of the emotion behind it. These men were being told something important about honor, about the debt owed to those who showed mercy to the helpless. He saw nods of approval, hands placed over hearts, the subtle signs of men accepting a new truth. As the warriors prepared to depart, Nalnish approached Thomas one last time. The boy, who had seemed so fragile and lost the night before, now stood straight and proud, transformed by his people's love and his grandfather's wisdom. "I tell you story now," the child said, his English improving with each sentence. "My mother, my father, killed by white soldiers 3 days past. I run into desert to die, because heart too broken to live. But you show me not all white men have stone hearts. You give me food when you hungry, water when you thirst. You save more than my body, you save my spirit." Thomas knelt down to the boy's level, his eyes burning with unshed tears. "You saved mine too, little brother. You showed me that kindness is never wasted, never lost." Nalnish smiled, the first true smile Thomas had seen on his face, and pressed something small into the cowboy's palm. It was a carved wooden horse, no bigger than a child's thumb, worn smooth by small hands. "I make this for you," the boy said, "so you remember Nalnish, who was your friend in the desert." The chief called to his grandson, and the boy ran to mount behind one of the warriors. As the Apache prepared to ride away, Chief Naye approached Thomas one final time. He spoke in English, his words careful but clear, as if he had been saving this language for a moment of great importance. "You think you give little?" the old chief said. His weathered face creased with something that might have been a smile. "Boy with empty belly, you give food. Boy with dry mouth, you give water. Boy with cold heart, you give warmth of human kindness. This is not little thing. This is everything." He mounted his horse with the fluid grace of a lifetime rider, then looked down at Thomas with eyes that held depths of wisdom earned through decades of leadership and loss. "Apache way. Kindness to children is sacred duty. You are not Apache, but you understand sacred duty. This makes you worthy of Apache honor." The war party departed as silently as they had come, dissolving into the desert landscape like morning mist. Thomas stood alone beside his new horse, surrounded by gifts that represented more wealth than he had ever dreamed of possessing. But the greatest treasure was invisible, the knowledge that his simple act of compassion had bridged a gap between two peoples locked in bitter conflict. Thundermoon nickered softly, nuzzling his shoulder as if to say it was time to begin their journey together. Thomas loaded his new supplies onto the magnificent saddle, marveling at the craftsmanship and the thoughtful design. Everything had been considered, from the placement of water holders to the comfort of the stirrups. This was the work of master artisans, given freely to a stranger. As he prepared to mount, Thomas caught sight of movement on a distant ridge. A small figure sat motionless on horseback, watching him. Even at this distance he knew it was Nalnish, taking one last look at the white man who had shared his bread with a hungry Apache child. Thomas raised his hand in farewell, and after a moment, the small figure raised his own hand in return. Then the boy was gone, leaving only empty sky and endless desert. Thomas swung into the saddle, and Thundermoon responded to his touch like a dream. The horse was perfectly trained, responding to the slightest pressure of knee or rein, her gait smooth and ground covering. As they rode south toward the mountains Chief Naye had described, Thomas felt a transformation taking place within himself that was as profound as his change in circumstances. The desert, which had seemed so hostile and threatening the day before, now revealed its hidden beauty. He noticed the delicate flowers blooming on the barrel cacti, the intricate patterns of wind-carved stone, the way the light danced and shifted across the vast landscape. Poverty and desperation had blinded him to wonders that now seemed obvious and magnificent. By noon, they had covered more ground than Thomas had managed in 2 days on poor old Dusty. Thundermoon seemed tireless, her powerful muscles eating up the miles with rhythmic precision. They stopped beside a clear spring that bubbled up from underground, another gift, as if the land itself was welcoming him to a new life. As he let the horse drink her fill, Thomas pulled out the carved wooden horse Nalnish had given him. Such a small thing, yet it represented something immeasurable, the moment when two enemies became friends, when hatred was overcome by simple human decency. He tucked it carefully into his shirt pocket, close to his heart, where it would remain for the rest of his life. The settlement Chief Naye had spoken of revealed itself on the afternoon of the third day, nestled in a valley between redstone cliffs like a jewel in a desert crown. Adobe buildings with red tile roofs clustered around a central plaza, where a fountain sparkled in the late Sunday. Gardens green with carefully tended crops spread out from the town center, fed by an irrigation system that spoke of cooperation and careful planning. As Thomas rode down the main street, he became aware of the attention he was drawing. People stopped their work to stare at the stranger on the magnificent paint horse, noting the quality of his gear and the obvious Apache craftsmanship of his saddle and accoutrements. Conversations died away as he passed, replaced by whispers and speculative glances. He found the town's leader, a weather-beaten man named Samuel Hartwell, at the blacksmith shop, discussing the shoeing of a draft horse. Hartwell looked up as Thomas approached, his eyes taking in every detail with the practiced assessment of a frontier town mayor. "Stranger," Hartwell said simply, his tone neutral but not unfriendly. "Don't believe I know you." "Thomas McCarty," he replied, dismounting with the easy grace that Thundermoon's perfect training allowed. "Chief Naye of the Apache sent me. Said you might have work for a man who knows horses in the land." The effect of those words was immediate and dramatic. Conversations stopped entirely, and Thomas found himself the center of intense scrutiny from every person within hearing. Hartwell's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline, and he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Chief Naye sent you?" he asked, disbelief and curiosity warring in his tone. That's never happened before. We've had a peace treaty with his people for 2 years now." but they keep to themselves. No Apache has ever recommended a white man to us. Thomas reached into his shirt and pulled out the turquoise amulet, letting it catch the afternoon light. A collective gasp rose from the gathered crowd, and Hartwell's expression shifted from skepticism to amazement. "That's a sacred stone," whispered an old woman who had pushed through the crowd to see. "My late husband traded with the Apache for 20 years, and I never saw them give one to a white man. What did you do to earn such honor?" "I shared my last meal with a hungry child," Thomas said simply. His grandfather felt it deserved recognition. The crowd murmured with appreciation and wonder. In a land where survival often meant choosing between self-preservation and charity, Thomas's act resonated with people who understood the weight of such choices. Hartwell extended his hand, and Thomas shook it firmly. "Any man who has earned Apache respect has earned ours as well," the mayor said. "We've been needing someone to manage our horse breeding program, and we've got land available for the right person. If you're willing to work hard and be part of our community, you'll find a welcome here." The months that followed were the happiest of Thomas McCarty's life. The small settlement, called Esperanza Spanish, for hope, proved to be everything Chief Naye had promised, and more. The people were hardworking, honest, and generous, welcoming Thomas not just as a resident but as family. His expertise with horses quickly became legendary. Under his guidance, the town's breeding program flourished, producing animals that were sought after throughout the territory. Thundermoon became the foundation mare for a line of horses that combined beauty, intelligence, and endurance in ways that seemed almost magical. Thomas's reputation spread, bringing buyers from as far away as California and Texas, but success in business was only part of his transformation. The turquoise amulet around his neck served as more than protection, it was a bridge between worlds. Apache traders began visiting Esperanza regularly, bringing goods and stories from their traditional lands. What had once been a relationship of wary truce blossomed into genuine friendship and mutual respect. Thomas learned Apache customs and language, becoming an unofficial ambassador between the two peoples. When disputes arose, both sides came to him for mediation, trusting his fairness and his unique position of respect in both communities. The wooden horse Naalnish had carved remained his most treasured possession, a reminder of the moment that changed everything. 6 months after his arrival, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of town. Naalnish, now taller and stronger, rode in with a group of Apache traders led by his grandfather. The boy, now growing into a young man, sought out Thomas immediately, his face bright with joy and pride. "My friend," he called out in much improved English, "I have news. My grandfather says the treaty with your people will be renewed for another 5 years. He says this is because of you, because you show that white men and Apache can be brothers." Chief Naye approached more slowly, his weathered face showing approval as he surveyed the prosperous town and the obvious friendship between his people and the settlers. He spoke to Thomas in Apache, words that Naalnish translated with obvious pride. "He says you have brought honor to the gift he gave you. He says Thunder Moon has told him in dreams that she is happy, that you treat her with respect and love. He says the sacred stone around your neck glows brighter because you use its protection not just for yourself, but to protect the friendship between peoples." That evening, the town held a great feast to celebrate the renewed treaty and the friendship that had made it possible. Apache and settlers sat together, sharing food and stories, their children playing together without fear or hatred. Thomas looked around the gathering, his heart full of gratitude for the chain of events that had brought him to this moment. As the evening wore on, Chief Naye approached Thomas with a proposal that would cement their friendship forever. Speaking through Naalnish, he offered to adopt Thomas as an honorary son of the Apache Nation, a gesture of respect rarely offered to any outsider. The adoption ceremony took place at dawn on the ridge overlooking Esperanza, with representatives from both communities witnessing the historic event. Chief Naye spoke words in Apache that seemed to call upon the spirits of earth and sky, marking Thomas's face with sacred symbols that would wash away but whose meaning would remain forever. "You are now hosting Naalnish man who feeds the hungry," the chief announced in English, his voice carrying across the morning air. "Among our people, this is a name of great honor, given only to those who put the needs of others before their own survival." Thomas knelt as the chief placed a magnificent headdress on his head, not the full war bonnet of a chief, but a simpler crown of eagle feathers that marked him as a man of respect and wisdom. The turquoise amulet around his neck seemed to pulse with warmth, as if acknowledging its new role in this expanded identity. As the ceremony concluded, Nailnish, now 12 years old and showing the promise of future leadership, presented Thomas with a gift that brought tears to his eyes. It was a painting on buffalo hide, depicting the scene from that fateful night in the desert. There was Thomas, sharing his bread with a small Apache boy, while in the background, barely visible, rode the spirits of Apache warriors coming to reward such kindness. "I made this to remember," Nailnish said, his English now fluent and confident. "So when you are old man, you remember the night you saved Hungry Boy, and Hungry Boy's family saved you back." Years passed, and the legend of Thomas McCarty hosting Nailnish spread throughout the Southwest. His ranch became a landmark, his horses prized across the nation, and his role as peacemaker essential to the harmony between Apache and settler communities. He married a school teacher from back east who had come west seeking adventure, and together they raised a family that included not only their own children but several Apache and Mexican orphans who found love and security in their home. The wooden horse Nailnish had carved never left Thomas's possession, passed down eventually to his own children with the story of its origins. Thunder Moon lived to the remarkable age of 32, producing colts and fillies that carried her gentle spirit and magnificent conformation to ranches throughout the West. When she finally passed, the entire town of Esperanza mourned, and Chief Naye himself came to speak words over her grave. But perhaps the greatest measure of Thomas's transformation could be seen in the town itself. Esperanza grew from a small settlement into a thriving city, known throughout the territory as a place where all peoples were welcome, where disputes were settled with wisdom rather than violence, and where the simple act of feeding a hungry child had blossomed into a community built on mutual respect and shared humanity. On his 70th birthday, as Thomas sat on his porch watching Apache and Mexican and American children playing together in his front yard, he reflected on the moment that had changed everything. One small act of kindness, performed without thought of reward, had rippled outward like stones thrown into still water, touching lives and hearts in ways he could never have imagined. Chief Naye, now ancient but still sharp of mind, visited that day to honor his adopted son. The old warrior's hands shook as he placed them on Thomas's shoulders, but his voice remained strong. "You think you saved one boy in desert," he said, his English now perfect after decades of friendship. "But you saved much more. You saved the future. You showed that enemies can become family, that kindness is stronger than hatred, that one good heart can change the world." As the sun set over the mountains that had watched over their friendship for so many years, Thomas understood that his greatest wealth had never been the horses or the land or the respect of two communities. His greatest treasure was the knowledge that somewhere in the vast desert of human experience, a moment of simple generosity had bloomed into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of compassion, to transform not just individual lives, but entire communities and the relationships between peoples. The wooden horse in his pocket seemed to pulse with warmth as he held it, a reminder that the greatest adventures begin not with grand gestures or elaborate plans, but with the simple decision to share what little we have with those who have even less. In that sharing, miracles are born, and the world becomes a place worthy of hope.